In a world where empires rose and fell by the sword, where steel clashed against steel and warriors relied on muscle, discipline, and courage, one discovery emerged that would forever shatter the very foundations of warfare. Imagine a battlefield where the roar of cannon fire drowns out the clash of swords, where smoke and fire turn disciplined ranks of soldiers into chaos, and where the power to dominate no longer depended solely on the strength of men, but on a black powder that came from the East. This is not just the story of a weapon. It is the story of how a single invention redefined the art of war, reshaped societies, and created the modern battlefield as we know it today. Stay with me, because over the next few minutes, we'll uncover how gunpowder changed everything, from the first trembling shots in China to the thunderous cannons that shattered the walls of Constantinople. This is not just history, it is the turning point in mankind's greatest struggle, the struggle for power. Gunpowder's invention is often traced back to 9th century China during the Tang dynasty. The story goes that Chinese alchemists, in their quest for immortality, stumbled upon a mixture of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal, an explosive combination that produced more destruction than eternal life. Joseph Needham, in his monumental work Science and Civilization in China, emphasizes that the Chinese did not immediately understand the full military potential of gunpowder, initially using it for fireworks, religious rituals, and incendiary devices. Yet, once its capacity for chaos was recognized, the transformation was unstoppable. By the 10th century, the Chinese military was already experimenting with fire lances, essentially bamboo or metal tubes packed with gunpowder that shot flames and projectiles. These were crude, but they signaled the beginning of handheld firearms, a revolution in itself. The first recorded battle where gunpowder weapons were decisively used was the Battle of Kaikang in 1232, when the Song dynasty defended itself against the Mongols. According to Thomas Arnold in the medieval military revolution, the Song forces used gunpowder-based bombs and fire arrows to rain destruction upon their attackers. Chronicles mention heaven-shaking thunder bombs that caused confusion and fear among enemy ranks. Though the Mongols eventually prevailed, they carried the secrets of gunpowder westward, setting the stage for its spread across Eurasia. It is one of history's greatest ironies that the very weapon the Song dynasty used to resist the Mongols became one of the tools of Mongol dominance. When gunpowder reached the Middle East and later Europe through the Silk Road, its adoption was rapid and profound. Historian Bert S. Hall in Weapons and Warfare in Renaissance Europe argues that Europeans were quicker than the Chinese or Islamic empires in turning gunpowder into a full-fledged engine of war. The reason was simple. Europe in the late Middle Ages was fragmented into countless competing kingdoms and city-states, each desperate for an advantage. By the mid-14th century, the battlefield echoed with the roar of cannons. The English used primitive cannon at the Battle of Carsae in 1346, though their role was still limited compared to the dominance of longbowmen. But make no mistake, this was the spark of a new age. Perhaps no single event illustrates gunpowder's revolutionary impact better than the fall of Constantinople in 1453. The great Byzantine capital had withstood sieges for over 1,000 years, its legendary Theodosian walls seen as impregnable. Yet Sultan Mehmed II, with the aid of massive bombards constructed by the Hungarian engineer Orban, brought cannons of unprecedented size to bear against the city. Historian Roger Crowley in 1453, the holy war for Constantinople and the clash of Islam and the West, vividly describes how these cannons hammered the walls day after day, eventually tearing open a breach wide enough for the Ottoman forces to pour in. The fall of Constantinople was not just the end of an empire. It was the death knell for medieval fortifications and the dawn of gunpowder siege warfare. And here, my friends, is where the transformation becomes undeniable. Knights in shining armor, the very symbol of medieval warfare, were rendered obsolete in the face of firearms. The armored cavalry charge, once the pinnacle of battlefield dominance, could not withstand disciplined lines of infantry armed with arquebuses and muskets. Geoffrey Parker, in his seminal work The Military Revolution, Military Innovation and the Rise of the West, 1500 to 1800, argues that gunpowder fundamentally reshaped not only tactics, but also the structure of states. To wield cannons and firearms effectively, rulers needed centralized bureaucracies, taxation systems, and logistical networks, creating the foundation of the modern nation-state. Before we dive deeper, let me pause and ask you something. If you're passionate about how warfare has shaped human history, and you want to explore more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and join our journey. This channel is built for those who admire the art of war, the strategy of generals, and the iron will of those who fought on the front lines of history. So, hit that subscribe button and let us continue uncovering the untold side of mankind's greatest battles. Gunpowder also created new military hierarchies. Where once martial skill and individual bravery defined a warrior's worth, the effectiveness of firearms meant that a peasant, trained to use a musket, could kill a knight whose family had trained in arms for generations. Michael Roberts, who coined the term military revolution, points out that this democratization of killing power changed social structures and eroded the traditional dominance of the aristocracy. It was not merely the technology of war that shifted, but the very balance of power in societies. Consider the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, where the Japanese warlord Oda Nobunaga deployed ranks of arquebusiers against the cavalry of the Takeda clan. As Stephen Turnbull describes in The Samurai and the Sacred, Nobunaga's disciplined volleys of musket fire devastated the Takeda horsemen, proving that even in the land of the samurai, honor and swordsmanship bowed before the thunder of gunpowder. The lesson was universal. No matter the culture, no matter the traditions, gunpowder weapons dictated a new way of war. By the 17th century, gunpowder weapons had become the heart of European warfare. The 30 Years' War, one of the bloodiest conflicts in European history, demonstrated the decisive role of firearms and artillery. Entire battlefields were transformed into fields of smoke, where disciplined formations of musketeers and pikemen clashed under the thunder of cannon. Historian V. Wedgwood describes in the 30 Years' War how sieges, bombardments, and massive artillery trains dictated the pace of campaigns, reducing cities to rubble and populations to despair. War was no longer the affair of knights and nobles, it was the affair of entire nations. The ripple effects of gunpowder reached beyond the battlefield. Fortifications evolved into the Tres Italienne, star-shaped bastions designed to resist cannon fire, a style perfected in Renaissance Italy and spread across Europe. Armies became professionalized, requiring permanent soldiers instead of feudal levies. States poured resources into their militaries, fueling an arms race that would never stop. As Parker notes, the military revolution fueled the rise of Europe to global dominance, for it was with cannon and musket that Europeans conquered vast territories across the world. But gunpowder was not only a tool of conquest. It was also a great equalizer. It allowed smaller states to defend themselves against larger aggressors. It gave revolutions a chance to succeed against established powers. From the American Revolution to the Wars of Liberation in South America, the musket was the instrument of change. And yet, it also multiplied the horrors of war, producing battlefields soaked in blood and cities reduced to ashes. To the military enthusiasts watching this, understand that the invention of gunpowder was more than a technical innovation. It was a cultural earthquake, a redefinition of heroism, and the dawn of a new age of organized, mechanized violence. From the first trembling fire lances in China to the roaring cannons of Europe, it reshaped the very way men fought, lived, and died. And so we return to our beginning. The black powder that came from the east, the humble mixture of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal, which forever transformed the fate of nations. As John Keegan wrote in A History of Warfare, with gunpowder, war became no longer the test of individual manhood, but the measure of states, the legacy of gunpowder is not only in the smoke and thunder of battle, but in the very foundations of the modern world. Because once gunpowder was unleashed, the age of swords and shields ended, and a new era began, an era that belongs not to the warrior alone, but to entire nations armed with fire and steel.